Hi there. Come on in. It's time for Old Time Radio. I'm your host, Jerry Sharp, inviting you to pull up a chair and listen with me to some old-time radio shows. I've got the old majestic radio all warmed up. We're going to reach out into that ether and listen to some comedy, adventure, and drama on old-time radio. And on today's show here, Buck Rodgers in the 25th century, broadcast going way back to 1939. And then here, Santa's Visit, as performed by the Log House Players of Mountain Iron, Minnesota, a little Christmas present to you. And then in our second half hour, hear Our Miss Brooks, starring Eve Arden, broadcast from December 5th, 1949. Well, Buck Rodgers must have been wildly jealous of Superman, who could rocket between planets stripped to his colorful underwear, while he required a full-fledged spaceship, a spacesuit, and a beautiful co-pilot to do the same interplanetary voyaging. But still, the 25th century adventurer must have taken some pride in the fact that he did his first flying in a 1929 newspaper strip 9 years before Superman appeared in comics and on radio. The program began 3 years after his first comic strip flight and started with a strange, thundering rumble that represented a time machine taking us into the future, forward into time, to share the adventures of Buck Rodgers in the 25th century. Well, after the commercial, which assured you that popsicles really were good for you, Buck Rodgers and his lovely sidekick were constantly getting ready for a blast-off. "Wilma, does all your equipment check out?" Buck Rodgers inquired. "Yes, Buck. I have the thermic radiation projector and the electrocosmic spectrometer and the super radiating proton former all set to go." "Well, let me check the tubes of your jet," Buck suggested. "On a trip like this, we can't afford to have anything go wrong." "I'll say not," Wilma agreed. "The future of the whole universe depends upon you, Buck, and Dr. Hewer. And you, Wilma. Don't forget you are an important part of this mission for the peace and security of the planets." Well, those were the immortal words spoken by Buck Rodgers around 1932. And they were written by the same man who years later was having Superman save merely the inhabitants of the planet Earth from disaster. Yes, the author of both The Adventures of Superman and Buck Rodgers in the 25th Century AD on radio was Jack Johnstone, who also produced and directed the programs. Now, let's hear that program from 1939. It's Buck Rodgers in the 25th Century.
Buck Rodgers in the 25th Century. Buck Rodgers is back on the air. Buck and Wilma and all their fascinating friends and mysterious enemies in the super scientific 25th century. This program is brought to you by the makers of Popsicle, Fudgicle, and Creamsicle, those delicious frozen confections on a stick. Now I have a swell surprise for you. The famous winner of the typical American boy contest has now become Popsicle Pete. And here's a message from him.
Hello, everybody. I sure am glad to meet you. And boy, am I glad I was picked to be the typical American boy. Because now I'm Popsicle Pete. I always wanted to be on the radio. And now I have a chance to tell you about some wonderful presents you can get free. Gee, you ought to see them. Hundreds of them. You get them just for saving bags from nifty Popsicle, Fudgicle, and Creamsicle. Some gifts, even better than Christmas. You can get a wristwatch, a movie camera, table tennis, a wallet, a doll. Gee, lots of gifts. Just save the bags from Popsicle, Creamsicle, and Fudgicle on a handy stick. Boy, did they taste good.
Wholesome, too. and nourishing, made fresh every day of the finest ingredients. The biggest 5 cents worth anywhere.
And say, kids, get the free illustrated Popsicle gift list at your ice cream store. A free coupon comes with it, worth 10 bags.
And now for Buck Rodgers and his thrilling adventures 500 years in the future. As you probably know, Buck was born right here in our own times, in this 20th century. And the story of how he got started on his amazing adventures so far in the future is mighty interesting. But instead of telling you about it, let's turn the dial that'll project us ahead in time and find out all about it that way. Now, the capital of 25th century America is Niagara. And there it is that Dr. Huer, the great scientist, has his marvelous laboratory. In one room of it, he's working on a strange-looking device that sends a peculiar greenish light down onto a human figure lying on a table before him. Shall we join him there? Okay, then, here we go. 500 years into the future.
The ray is putting you to sleep. To sleep. Relax and sleep. 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 Good. The ray's had its effect. Now I can go ahead. Yes, come in. Oh, hello, Wilma.
Hello, Dr. Huer. My, why don't you have more light in here? Coming in from outside, I can hardly see a thing in this spooky greenish glow.
Part of a little experiment I'm conducting.
Oh,
But tell me, have you seen anything of Black Barney here in Niagara?
why, no. Hasn't given up his job of Prime Minister on Mars, has he?
Oh, no. But one of his Martian rocket ship factories has worked out a new control device for me. I rather hoped he'd get here with it today.
Oh,
Meantime, I've made ready for a final test of this little invention here. Like to stay and see it?
I'd love to, Doctor, and you know it, but I just dropped in to find out if you'd seen any sign. Oh,
What's the matter?
Doctor, what's happened to him?
Eh?
Is he all right? Doctor,
I see.
what's happened to him? Why is he lying here on the table?
Now, don't worry, Wilma.
Don't worry. Doctor, what do you...
He has offered to be the subject of my test. That's all.
But then,
Well,
why
he's
is he...
simply lying here, comfortably asleep, under the influence of my electro-hypnotic ray.
Oh, I was afraid something had happened to him.
Not a thing. Surely you don't think for a minute that I'd do anything
No,
to...
of course not. But the electrohypnotic ray, are you sure this experiment won't hurt him in any way?
Oh, absolutely sure.
Well, you can't blame me for being a little shocked for a minute. But what's that thing up near his head that looks like a miniature power plant with a loudspeaker on top of it?
That, Wilma, is my latest scientific achievement. My newly perfected electro-hypno-mentalophone.
Your what?
Well, you remember the mentaloscope, don't you?
Oh, sure. When you put a person under the mentaloscope, all his memories showed up on a sort of moving picture screen.
That's right. And this is an adaptation of it.
Oh.
With this, the electro-hypno-mentalophone, the memories of the subject will come to us verbally, through the loudspeaker here. Provided, of course, that my calculations have been correct.
Sort of read a person's mind aloud, you mean?
Yes, that's it exactly.
Where do you ever get ideas for things like this, Dr. Huer? Surely people don't just barge in and ask you to work them out.
Hardly. The scientific research and experimentation that led up to the development of this machine was started way back in the 20th century.
Why, I always thought that the people back in the 20th century weren't much better than savages in what they knew about scientific things.
Oh, not at all, Wilma. Oh, we owe a great deal to the scientists of those days. Were it not for the groundwork laid by men like Einstein, Fitzgerald, Compton, Millikan, and the rest, we'd be without a great many of the things we have today.
They never really got anywhere with rocket ship development or anything like that, though, did they?
Well, successful rocket flight depends on two things that have been brought into existence only recently.
One of them must be a neutron.
Yes, a neutron. The material that defies gravity and makes it possible to lift a big spaceship off the Earth and away from its terrific gravitational pull without too much waste of power.
And what's the other?
Impervium, the only metal capable of withstanding the high temperature of rocket blasts for any length of time. But now, let's go ahead with this experiment.
Yes, let's. And you can tell me how this apparatus works as we go along, just what it does to them.
Well, not very much to tell you about the apparatus itself, Wilma, except that Here, in this little pad under his head, is an extremely sensitive and high-frequency response piezoelectric oscillator of quite complicated design.
Yes, I guess so.
Yes. And I've succeeded in tuning it to receive the minute electronic impulses that emanate from his brain
Yeah.
through the medium of a superradiating protonoformer.
Oh, yes, Oh, what?
In other words, we're able to obtain sufficient amplification of the impulse output to register audibly through a process of thermionic note magnification. That's all there is to it.
I think I'll understand it better when I see this thing work.
I shall be very much disappointed if it doesn't.
Oh, don't you worry about that, Doctor. Your inventions always work.
I have been rather lucky in most of my experiments, haven't I?
Lucky.
Well, now let's proceed with this one.
All right. Anything I can do to help?
No, thanks. First of all, we'll have to switch in the electronoformer.
Gives the electronoformer a sort of eerie sound.
Yes. And now, when I switch on this microphone and speak to him, my words will be registered directly on his brain. Not through his ears, you understand, but directly on his brain.
Uh-huh.
And if we're successful, we'll receive his subconscious response through the loudspeaker.
Go ahead, Doctor.
Now, young man, what is your name? I said, what is your name?
Buck Rodgers.
Wilma, it works!
But, Doctor,
My invention's a success.
Doctor, what happened?
It works even better than I thought it would.
He didn't move his lips, though. And how could we hear him talk if he didn't move his lips?
It read his mind aloud, Wilma. It read his mind aloud.
Sounded like his real voice, though.
Well, of course, because he thinks of speech in the same manner that he utters it.
Great day, it doesn't seem possible. Ask him some more questions.
Yes, by all means. Listen. Buck, you were born back in the 20th century, were you not?
Yes, sir. But this is the 25th century.
You see, Wilma, his memory's preserved intact.
May I ask him a question?
Surely, go ahead. Go ahead.
Buck, how did you happen to come to the 25th century?
One day in the year 1919, I was in the lower workings of an abandoned mine near the city of Pittsburgh.
Yes?
All of a sudden, the supports that held up the walls and ceiling gave way and the whole thing caved in on me.
Yes?
Some kind of peculiar gas was released. It put me to sleep. It kept me in a state of suspended animation for 500 years. Then the ground shifted and let in fresh air, and I woke up.
Well, how did you know you were in suspended animation for 500 years?
Instead of the year 1919, it was the year 24-something. To be exact, it was 24...
How did you know what year it was?
I was told about it by Lieutenant Wilma Deering, a beautiful girl soldier I met when I first did it.
Oh, then you knew Wilma Deering.
Doctor.
Oh, I certainly do. She's the finest and bravest girl who ever lived.
Yeah.
Why, Wilma...
Buck Rodgers,
Yes?
did you find anything new and different when you first came into the 25th century?
Oh, a great deal, thanks to Dr. Hewer,
Dr. Hewer?
the greatest scientist who ever lived.
What's this?
Nowhere in the universe is there a scientist who's done so much good for humanity or done anything that can even begin to
No, wait.
compare with.
Wait a minute, Buck.
Yes?
Just forget Dr. Hewer and go on with what you were saying.
But he's the man who invented the first rocket ship that took us to the moon. And it was that trip that proved the practicability of interplanetary flight.
Practicability of interplanetary flight. Nothing wrong with this machine, Doctor.
Where else have you gone by rocket ship, Buck?
But first to Mars, where we helped King Analdo put down an invasion by the Martian Tiger Men.
Yes.
Then to Saturn and the Saturnian moons, Venus, Jupiter, and even far-off Pluto.
Which planet did you find most interesting?
Well, that's hard to say. Jupiter has the biggest field for exploration simply because it's so much larger than the rest of the planets.
Very true. Do you expect to do any more rocketing around through outer space?
Well, there's nothing else I'd rather do, sir.
Well, Wilma, do you like my little contraption?
Oh, it's wonderful, Doctor. I told you it would work.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to ask, Buck, before I turn off this green ray?
Let's wake him up and see if he remembers anything that happened during the experiment.
All right. Go ahead.
All right. Come on, Buck. Wake up.
Huh?
I say, wake up. You've been asleep.
Sleep?
Uh-huh.
Oh, hello, Wilma.
Hello.
Hey, where'd you come from? What are you doing here?
I've just been let in on the test of Dr. Hewer's
Electro-hypno-mentalophone.
Yeah.
Oh, and doggone it. Instead of helping you with your test, I fell asleep. Say, I'm awfully sorry, Doctor.
Sorry?
Oh, yes, sir. I was going to
But,
help
Buck,
you.
I put you to sleep with this machine.
Oh, really?
That's right.
Oh, I guess that's one on me, then. How'd it work?
Even better than I expected.
Oh, good.
Oh, it was marvelous, Buck. You told us your whole life history without even opening your mouth.
Hey, now, wait a minute.
It's all right, Buck. You didn't say a single thing you shouldn't have.
Oh, thank goodness for that. Let's put Wilma under it.
Oh, no, you don't.
Oh, you have to do something for excitement around here. Come on, Wilma.
Oh, you're never satisfied unless there's something exciting going on, are you, Buck?
Well, it's not as bad as all that, Doctor, but things have been sort of slow around here lately, and...
Wait until we start making tests of the new type of gyrocosmic relativator I've just devised.
A new one?
Isn't that the equipment on a rocket ship that makes it possible to take off without much loss of time for pickup?
That's right. And without the usual physical effects of too quick acceleration. It removes from your ship the normal effects of weight and inertia and momentum and the like.
Well, how have you improved the relativator, Doctor?
Buck, if this new instrument does what I hope it will, there'll be practically no limit to the speed of a rocket ship immediately upon taking off.
Good night. Imagine getting into the control cabin, opening the power lever, and going a couple of 1,000 miles an hour just like that.
That's exactly what we'll be able to do, Wilma.
Boy, that hardly seems possible, does it? But when can we test it out, Doctor? Have you already got it installed on a rocket ship?
No, Buck. As a matter of fact, I don't even have it yet.
Huh?
Oh, it's been made up all right. The one we'll use for the test, but it isn't right here yet.
I don't understand, Doctor.
Well, yes, sir. Can't we get it here? The sooner we can get it and start trying it out, the sooner we can break the monotony of just sitting around here doing...
Wait, Buck. Listen.
Yes, Doctor. I hear it, too.
Well, yeah.
Hear it?
Yes, sir. But what under the sun is it?
Look here, out of the window.
Look, here's Wilma. And it's coming right down this way. Wilma!
Say, Buck's wish for excitement certainly came true in a hurry. Great day. I wonder what that was. And I certainly hope he and Wilma and Dr. Hewer are all right. What do you say, Pete?
Well, I know what would make me feel all right. A great big frozen fudgicle. Jiminy, can you imagine anything better than that fresh, creamy chocolate fudge frozen ice cold on a stick?
Fellas and girls, what's the best, purest, biggest nickel's worth you can get? Right, a fudgicle. Delicious and full of healthful energy. Made only from pure milk products. Swell to eat and easy to digest. Now, don't forget to save the bags for those wonderful free prizes. Exciting gifts like cameras, dolls, sweatshirts, gorgeous jewelry, and lots of other things.
Now listen, kids. Be sure to get your free Popsicle gift list at your ice cream store. Don't take no for an answer.
Well, the Buck Rodgers radio programs borrowed liberally from the original comic strip by Phil Nolan and Dick Calkins, but developed some of the ideas in an interesting fashion. The relationship between Buck and Wilma Deering, his blonde assistant, so antiseptic in the comic strips, became more human through the added dimension of live voices. When they were marooned on an Arctic ice mountain, they were far from cool. Contemplating the moon and the stars, their voices got lower and lower and even more intimate. Outraged mothers overhearing the children's radio's programs wrote in letters of protest about the scene as they imagined it. Well, the stories were set in an interplanetary future that had whole planets at war with each other, just to sell Rice Krispies and then cocoa malt and even popsicles. Although the warfare was symbolic and bloodless, there were a lot of protesting letters about Buck's adventures. It's surprising that anyone bothered, since even the menace on Buck Rodgers couldn't really upset anyone. His arch enemy, Killer Kane, was a pathetic, henpecked boob who was always being pushed around by a villainess named Ardala. She not only had all the looks in the outfit, but had all of the brains. and without her, Kane was helpless. And on those rare occasions when he succeeded, it was only by blind luck. Like the time he was trying to burn up an entire planetoid 2 or 3 miles in diameter. He tried matches on the coal-like rockets, a cigarette lighter, a blowtorch, and finally a flamethrower. No luck. And in disgust and fury, Kane drew his ray gun and blasted the offending rock. It burst into flame, a typical Kane victory. And now, my old-time radio friends, just a few days to go before Christmas time. A little Christmas present for you, as recorded by the Log House Players of Mountain Iron, Minnesota. A little play called Santa's Visit.
You didn't believe in Santa Claus.
What are you doing here?
The same you're doing, I guess.
Waiting for Father and Mother to come in when they think you're asleep.
Mother and Father aren't coming in unless you make a lot of noise. They've gone to bed.
Bet they haven't.
Well, they have. I looked.
Well, bet they get up again to fill our stockings, and you'll get it when they find out you're here. You're supposed to be in bed.
I suppose you're supposed to be here? You're supposed to be in bed just as much as me.
At least I'm not waiting for Santa.
Then what are you waiting for?
Well, if you must know, I'm waiting for Father and Mother to come in with the presents. I'm going to call their bluff this year.
Do you think they'd lie to us? The way you talk.
Oh, I don't think they mean to lie to us, but grown-ups like to tell stories. It amuses them.
I don't think Mother would tell me there was a Santa Claus if there wasn't.
Oh, she thinks we like hanging up our stockings and putting out lunches for Santa. She doesn't want to spoil our fun.
Yes, and every year Santa eats the lunch.
Pooh! That's just goes to show what a dummy you are. Mother and Father eats it. Brr, it's cold in here. I'm going to light the fire.
You can't! You'll burn Santa!
You silly. It's Mother and Father. I can get you out of here.
It's Santa Claus!
Well, well, so you've caught me this time.
Good evening, Santa. I knew you were real.
And so your brother doesn't believe in me?
No, but if he could see you.
He couldn't see me because he doesn't believe in me.
Do you mean he couldn't see you here? No?
Did you ever see anything you didn't believe in, Dolly?
No.
Oh, of course you didn't. Well, I must get to work. I have a busy night.
There's some lunch on the table if you're hungry.
Lunch?
If you have time.
Now, that's thoughtful of you. I do get hungry. Jelly sandwiches, my very favorite. And sugar for the reindeer. You've thought of everything, dearie.
Are your reindeer here?
Indeed. They're up on the roof now, waiting for me. Do you hear them pawing?
Yes. And he said they couldn't get up on the roof.
Well, your brother just doesn't believe in what he can't understand.
He says Mother and Father fill our stockings.
Well, mothers and fathers do help me out, you know. I have helpers all over the world.
Do you leave presents even to boys and girls who don't believe in you?
Of course I do. So many people believe in me, but don't even know it. Actually, anyone who wants to give believes in me, because I'm the spirit of giving. And if you remember that, you'll always believe in me, won't you?
Oh, I will.
I know you will. And now, I'm going to turn into a dream for you. And when you wake up, you'll wonder if I really was here. But you know I was when you see that I've eaten the sandwiches that filled the stocking. Merry Christmas to all! And to all, a good night!
That goes double, Santa. Merry Christmas from us, too. Those playing in this little play were Betsy Sharp, Bob Heileman, and yours truly. Well, now I think it's time for us to get set up for our second half hour by telling you a little bit about what you'll be hearing. Our Miss Brooks was a show that teachers everywhere took to their hearts from the first broadcast. Here at last was a teacher seen as something other than a sexless tormentor of 10th grade morons. Connie Brooks, the show's heroine, taught English at Madison High School, in a town of mid-America that somehow had a little piece of everywhere built into its foundations. Perhaps that was the secret of the program's success. For teachers, our Miss Brooks was all too human, finding plenty of time during the weekly half-hour comedy format to complain about her lowly salary, and to chase Philip Boynton, the bashful biology teacher. The show premiered on CBS July 19, 1948, and was one of the network's most popular comedies for 9 years. For 6 years, Colgate sponsored the program, and then Tony Home Permanent began footing the bills. With Ozzie and Harriet, Life with Luigi, and the Phil Harris Alice Faye Show, our Miss Brooks was one of the last bright lights of radio situation comedy. The title role was perfect for Eve Arden, a refugee from the B-movies. She was born in Mill Valley, California, and when she set out with a touring theatrical group to see the world, she combined the names on cosmetic bottles on a dressing room table. From Evening in Paris and Elizabeth Arden, the name Eve Arden was created. With her touring company, she played barns and hotel lobbies in the early 1930s and finally landed in the Ziegfeld Follies in 1936. Hollywood beckoned the following year, and she embarked on a film career. Her earliest notable acting credit was in Oh Doctor in 1937. Following that, Miss Arden played gun malls, wisecracking babes in more than 50 horrible Hollywood capers, among them The Forgotten Woman in 1939, Slightly Honorable in 1940. She Couldn't Say No in 1941. Those B-rolls began to taper off only after Our Miss Brooks had become a national hit, and she could afford the luxury of selecting her own slots. Her comic gifts had long been overlooked by filmdom, and so it was in radio that she found her greatest success. She brought to the character a sarcastic wit that became its strong trademark. Writer Al Lewis captured the human side of Connie Brooks. Each year, Miss Arden received thousands of letters from teachers frustrated with their own circumstances. At least half a dozen high schools offered her jobs teaching English. She turned down the jobs, but sometimes spoke at PTA meetings. Well, the schools couldn't have afforded her anyway. By then, she was making $200,000 a year for being the tart-tongued schoolmarm of the air. I should tell you that some of the material on today's show is from a couple of books. The Great Radio Heroes by Jim Harmon, and Tune In Yesterday, a book written by John Dunning. In just a little bit, we're going to be back with you right after Station ID, and we'll be listening to that Our Miss Brooks program starring Eve Arden, and it will be played exactly as it was broadcast on December 5th, 1949. Now let's pause for station identification.